Cowboys victory. We saw a James Cook performance. We saw a coming out party from him. The run blocking 4 yards per carry. Only one time was he hit. That he had to make a guy miss early in the backfield. Like, I mean, those are just impressive running performances, whether it's from the running back to the O-line to the scheme. Joe Brady was, I mean, just like Dan was talking about with Kellen Moore, in terms of like, is he getting a fair shake? Well, maybe Kellen Moore with a fair shake, it'd be like like Brady is, in terms of what he's been able to do post his Carolina days, where he's clearly didn't get a fair shake, Kevin.
Joe Brady's been phenomenal. I mean, we've been talking about it ever since that Jets game. And that was the first week where it's like, okay, going off of your point about making that coaching change, it seems like naturally the team responds better when you fire the coach. I'm sorry, but taking a quick little side note, I'm wondering if the Sabres are going to have that same vision with Don Granato, but that's besides the point. But in terms of the Bills, when they fired Ken Dorsey, I know sometimes it was a polarizing opinion where some people were saying, well, the Bills have all these numbers and the stats, and they still have Josh Allen, so just let Dorsey stick around because the numbers are favorable. But then there are a lot of us, myself included, that said, but look at the eye test. So I know the numbers are good, but are they really utilizing these players properly? And every single week, we're seeing Joe Brady figure out ways to unleash James Cook and Ty Johnson for that matter. And again, Gabe Davis was held catchless. And as bad as that might sound, considering he's a wide receiver too that's up for a new contract this offseason, I think that's also a really good thing because that means that James Cook has just been absolutely, cooking because defenses don't know how to stop him in the run game or the pass game. So naturally, you're going to want to keep feeding him. And then naturally, Gabe Davis's targets are going to go down. So again, I mean, that could be a bad thing when you say, well, Gabe Davis is really decreased his production ever since Joe Brady took over. We got to get him going again. And maybe they will because the Chargers secondary is so weak. But again, looking at it from a glass half full perspective, I think that is in large part due to the fact that Joe Brady has let James cook.
There you have it. For me personally, you look at it in a situation to where we got into it at the end there with Dan, like the Bills do really good at the end of seasons. They just do. Like, it's a trend. It isn't like a one-off, one lucky, one thing. You have a tweet out there, I think. Like, I've said many times, different statistics around the end of the season. I mean, you went on record, I don't know, was it 3-4 weeks ago now? Maybe 4 weeks ago, saying that after you predicted a Philly loss, and you said after the Philly loss that they would rail off 5 straight. So we'll have to see. I mean, off the bat, was it 6 straight after the Philly? Was it 6 straight? So it would have been 5 straight. 5 straight.
I said they're going to drop the Philly game, go to 6-6, go into the bye. Everyone's going to be worried. We're going to watch the Dolphins win, and then they're going to respond with 5 straight wins. And so far, so good.
So far, so good. They don't control their own destiny. We'll get into a little bit of that in a little bit. But there's certainly there is a doomsday scenario we'll get into later on. But the Bills, at least on the AFC, pretty straightforward. They do need a Dallas win. They do need a Dallas or Baltimore win. They definitely want a situation to where they can control their own AFC East destiny, not just their own playoff destiny. So there's a couple scenarios we'll get into in a little bit. But from a Bills defensive standpoint now, I mean, you can't do much better than that. They had a little lapse early on with scripted plays by Dak Prescott, but buckled down around midfield and really put some pressure on Dallas all day. They got to him 3 times against a pretty good Dallas offensive line. They, got even more pressure. Basically had them off rhythm. The Bills' corner scheme was great. The help side with Taron Johnson going to Poyer and dime, bringing in Cam Lewis, who played excellent. McDermott's a great defensive coach. Like, whether he has issues in game or whatever we want to say off the field, regular season, Bills defense is really good. And you saw a little snippet of it. We've seen some lapses, though, this year, which was starting to make people nervous against New England in the game you mentioned and a couple of other problems. But are you feeling confident now with this defense and Sean McDermott with what they've done in back-to-back weeks, only allowing 27 points to Mahomes and Dak Prescott, to always a top quarterbacks, couple of MVP? I mean, Dak was like top 3 in MVP voting prior to the game. Mahomes, not so much right now this year, but he's always been an MVP candidate. How are you feeling that you've let up an average of 13.5 points to 2 top 5 offenses?
Well, I said this 2 weeks ago, and I'm going to say it again. The Bills did the hard part. The hard part is over. You beat Kansas City and you beat Dallas. Now, that's not to say that this is going to be a cakewalk, because to my point earlier, we've seen the Bills drop those very easy, winnable games to the Jets, Patriots, and Broncos. So, again, I'm going to remain optimistic and say that they will be able to pull it together. And we're not going to see those old Bills, rear its ugly head again, because I think this is a new team. So, yeah, I mean, I have been really, really impressed that they have been able to contain Patrick Mahomes and Dak Prescott, two of the best offenses in the NFL. And I know that the Chiefs were down this year and still are, but the Cowboys were ranked number 1 last week. We talked about that when we were going over the team stats. The number 1 scoring offense. They were top 5, top 10 in just about every single category. And say what you want about the weather, but Dallas had no answers for this Bills defense. And I think it is so impressive considering the injuries that Sean McDermott has had to deal with this year. And you're getting guys like Leonard Floyd, Terrell Bernard, Christian Benford, Jordan Phillips, who unfortunately is dealing with that wrist injury now. But talk about the depth that this team has put together. So I should mention Brandon Beane's name here. But regardless, this defense, I feel confident against any team now. Now, if you are in, let's just say, this week, for example, when they go to SoFi Stadium, or the Super Bowl is in Glendale. So it's going to be in Arizona, or is it in Vegas this year? I don't even know. I haven't looked that far yet.
Vegas.
Yeah. So either way, when you make it to the ultimate goal, it's going to be an indoor climate, perfect weather conditions. They're not going to have to deal with the elements and the factors. But I mean, look at Terrell Dodson. Perfect example. Now, say what you want about Terrell Dodson, but PFF loves him. And I'll say that Terrell Dodson has been playing some great football lately. And maybe he's not the best linebacker, especially in pass coverage. And no one's going to be on the level of Matt Milano. But the way that he has been able to come in to replace Milano, and McDermott has been able to coach him up, I think that speaks volumes, because there just has not been any drop off. And then going back to the secondary, you mentioned Rasul Douglas. That was one of the best trade deadline acquisitions that I can remember in recent memory, because Douglas has consistently shut down opposing wide receiver ones. And we all love Trey White and we miss him dearly. But at the same time, we're not even thinking about him that much, because Douglas has just been such a shutdown corner. And then even someone like Taylor Rapp, he comes in for Micah Hyde. He had one of his best games ever. And I think that's a testament to McDermott being able to coach these players up. And again, Bean assembling the roster, and then obviously the players for executing. But right now, everything is in sync. And the Bills are clicking on all cylinders, offense and defense. And that has got me really, really confident for these final 3 weeks.
And the big note that Daquan Jones was practicing today, taken off of the designated for return list, put onto the designated for return list from the standard IR, has 3 weeks to ramp up. By all accounts, from sources that I've been told within the team, he's expecting to play against Miami week 18. So that is what I've heard from inside the Bills roster, or inside the Bills team. We will see if that comes to fruition. But week 18 is what's on the fold for the team, as well as the Bills expect. We'll see what happens over the next 2 weeks. The Bills expect a full roster against Miami week 18. They got to get there first, though, Kevin. They cannot have any lapses going forward. And we'll get into scenarios in just a moment here. But they have to get the job done and not have one of these simple little letdowns that you've mentioned that they've had in some of those other games. London's one thing that was a crazy scenario. The Jags were like at the top of their game. They are now struggling. The Bills had just lost a bunch of players and had to travel. That's a little. They just lost Trey White, and then lost 2 players in the game. So that's like a little bit different. And then Bengals are always a tough out with Burrow and Chase, and they were full strength. They dominated the 49ers. They beat the Bills in a tough game. They needed a Joe Mixon run at the end of the game against Josh Norman to salt that game away. Beside that, though, those 3 games are acceptable. The Jets, Patriots, and Denver games were unacceptable losses here for this roster. And then the Philly in overtime, the game that was maybe the hardest of all of them. And the Bills played really good. Needed a 59-yard field goal and rain wind, as well as an A.J. Brown fumble. To me, that was a fumble. You're going to call other things fumbles in this league. We've seen it happen. That was a fumble. Bills should have walked off there on that fumble recovery against A.J. Brown. But alas, that they win 2 straight, and they've played really great. And to have Daquan Jones come back with 3 top 20 corners, Benford, Razul Douglas, as well as Taron Johnson, 3 top 20 corners right now.
And Kyrie Elam is healthy again.
And Kyrie Elam, they don't have a roster spot for him. What do you even do to get him on the roster? You've already cut AJ Klein in order to activate Dawson Knox. I don't know who you cut right now, especially if you still need Kingsley Jonathan here. It's a tricky situation. The Bills do not have the roster spot to activate him at the moment. So I don't know what they do there. And even Daquan Jones are going to have to make a move somewhere to bring him back onto the roster, especially with the emergence and kind of the spot usage of Linval Joseph as well, which is another addition to this team that, the Bills have found pretty useful here. And then hopefully, I think Mookie Hawkins also just had stated that AJ Epinesa is hoping to play this week as well. It is healing quicker than he thought. And I quote, he's a game time decision. He's been able to move better this week and feels like things are mending sooner than expected. So that is the report that we have from Mookie Hawkins from WUFO 1080 AM 96.5. So that's what we got. The Bills are getting healthy at the right time. They were able to prove it. Cam Lewis came in safety coverage, and now people are talking about Cam Lewis as a potential replacement for a potential loss of Micah Hyde as well in the future. So the Bills, they develop DBs, period. It's a strange situation with Kyrie Elam, but the rest of the roster has developed. They generally don't miss on DBs. You even see Alex Austin, who was drafted by the Bills, starting in the league right now in New England, I believe. So it's quite crazy what the Bills are able to do at the DB position. And part of the reason why, and now the defensive line is top 3 or 4 in the league in sacks. And you have a situation that that's really good. I do not believe Phillips goes on IR or he's out 4 games and would miss the first playoff game. By all accounts, he is expecting to play the wild card round. I don't know about week 18, but by all accounts, he's pushing for it. So I don't think with the limited games, they have to have inactives anyways on game day. I think you see Phillips go to the inactives list instead of IR now that we're within 4 games left of the season, 3. You won't see as much IR usage unless they're done. So that being said, I don't believe he goes on that list. I think you'll want him prior to 4 full games being removed from the system. Finally here, as we talk about, to pivot a little bit back to the Chargers game and what this Bills roster is going to be able to do. This spread, Kevin, makes me nervous. Just all things, there's nothing that's pointing in their way. Kind of reminds me of New England. However, I guess New England's roster at that time was a little better. Is Mac Jones better than Easton Stick? I don't know. It's tough to me. I don't think that roster is very good, but the Bills are playing better. So let's construct the game plan. What do you think? He mentioned attacking these corners, and they are some of the worst corners I've ever seen. Some of these pass numbers are terrible. I don't even know. You don't even need to run the ball. I mean, their roster is terrible, defensively especially. So, Kevin, what do you think the Bills need to do to secure a W in a game where there's not a lot that points the Chargers' way?
Well, I think this is an interesting spot because I wonder if the Chargers are going to game plan extra hard for James Cook because of his big performance, 25 rushes, 179 yards, 42 receiving yards, a couple of touchdowns. So I'm wondering if that's going to open the door for Stephon Diggs. And I know that sounds weird because if he's wide receiver 1, you're naturally going to be game planning for Diggs. But I'm kind of hoping that the Chargers say, oh, wow, they are really figuring out how to use James Cook. Let's try to figure out how to slow him down. And that's going to open the door for Diggs to go off for, like I said with Dan, 7, 8, 9, 10 catches, 150 yards, 1 or 2 touchdowns, and be that top dog that we know that he can be, because it's weird that he hasn't gone over 100 since week 6 against the Giants. So this could be a huge game for Allen and Diggs to rekindle that chemistry together. And it's not that they never lost it. I mean, Diggs has still been productive. He just hasn't been putting up those all-pro type of numbers. So I'm kind of hoping that they try to game plan James Cook, because I'm confident now that even if they do, Brady's going to figure out how to counter that. And they're going to have different counter punches where James Cook can still be effective, and Ty Johnson for that matter, But ultimately, I think that this could be a big week for Stephon Diggs. And I'm going to throw Gabe Davis's name in there too, because again, I know that he has seen his production decrease. I have a graphic that I'm going to pull up. But I think that this could be a week we're talking about Michael Davis, and it's just such a weak secondary. The Chargers defense is 29th in total defense, 30th in passing defense. And I tweeted this out earlier this week. Gabe Davis has been held catchless in 4 out of the last 6 weeks. But looking at it from a glass half full perspective, in those 6 weeks, James Cook has 22 receptions for 241 yards and 3 touchdowns on top of his 482 rushing yards and 1 rushing touchdown. And like I said in the tweet, whatever it takes to win. So I think that the Bills are clicking on all cylinders right now, and they can attack these teams, specifically the Chargers, on Saturday night from multiple different angles.
Yeah, Bills overall defense, top 10 in the league, back to 10th overall in DVOA, 14th against the pass, 17th against the rush. However, their overall composite score is 11th in the league. Last week, they were 15th, and they've bumped all the way up from 11th to 10th too, just recently, based on some new deviations there as well. So they've played really well overall. Once again, it's been a good situation. 11th against the pass has been a really good scenario for them. But as you look at to construct the offensive game plan, and as you kind of break down what the Chargers do well, and it's not a lot defensively. So I guess to your point, it's kind of like pick your poison in a way almost. And if you look at their pass rank, it's just glaring at 28th. Like at some point, like I think Josh Allen does what he needs to do to get this thing done. 28th DVOA, their rush rank isn't much better advanced analytics wise. Like there's just nothing that like the Bills could do wrong. So maybe they do couple off of that game plan that they had last week, or maybe they still come out and show you that these DBs are bad. And if you try to drop into some type of man coverage, if they were going to play some cover 2 shell, like Josh Allen can still get it done. And this might be a game where, I don't know, against a situation where maybe Josh feels like he has a little bit more leeway, will we see big time Josh? I hope so, but will that come with some turnovers? Maybe not. Will they just show the league that we can run the ball now? Like we're going to run the ball. If we need passing situations or you get us in a down and distance that isn't ideal, Josh Allen will do his thing. So we'll see. I think shortening the game, I don't think you need to win 40-10. If you do, you do. But I think ultimately you take a 2-score win, you run the clock out, you get no injuries. And that's kind of how I see this game going. The game is get the game over with. There's nothing good to come out of this game. You need a W, and that's it. Nothing else matters. You've beaten some good opponents. You're not the Miami Dolphins yet in terms of never beating a team with a winning record. They need to prove it against Dallas this week and then Baltimore. Bills have proved it. They're 3-3 against teams over 500. Fairly good strength of victory in the league. They have no real issues right now with not being able to prove that. And then they competed against Philly. They have no problems against teams with winning records. So let's get out of this game. Let's run the ball. Let's pass where needed. If they have plus matchups and they're there to sell out to stop the run for some reason when you have Josh Allen, let him do it. And then I believe Josh Allen will absolutely torch you. Run the ball, shrink the game, do exactly what you did against Dallas. If they come with a struggle on offense, then you will see a similar game to Dallas last week. If they are able to move the ball a little bit somehow, then maybe you'll get into that range that Dan was talking about of a 28-17, 28-20, something like that. I do think the Bills win by 2 scores, not 3. That is my prediction.